Commissioner, on top of all of our minds with respect to the Department of Human Services is the issue of Medicaid. And one of my questions to Commissioner Washington, which I would like to pose to you this morning, is it not true that the federal government has increased our Medicaid dollars this year by over $1 billion?
I would say the federal contribution to Medicaid has increased this year. That is due to both medical inflation growth that we see in the program. I think our program is growing at about 4 to 6% in the Medicaid service line. So that is happening. We do see some impacts, and again, that's outlined in the chart before you in terms of the fiscal impact of a lot of those enrollment losses this year, but the growth rate does exceed for this year the federal decreases in that contribution. But I want to be clear, two things. Number one, a lot of the enrollment changes don't necessarily come as a deficit to the Medicaid program. There are people we don't have to cover, but where there are people we don't have to pay out for either. So even if there are, say, as we project, 10 to 30,000 fewer individuals this state fiscal year, we to some degree might see a little bit of a state savings because of that, small, but that doesn't mean it's savings for the state. Those people will show up in ERs, those people will show up in FQHCs. We are going to have to pay for those individuals in uncompensated care in multiple ways. That's point number one. Point number two is medical inflation is real, as you know. So for all the reasons, and happy to get into a whole other dissertation on that, healthcare inflation continues to rise at, I believe, unsustainable levels. But the way to solve for that is not simply just pay less. We have to figure out how to structurally make the program differently to bring that rate of healthcare inflation down, or people are without services, quite bluntly. So while you are seeing accurately an increase in some of the federal funds, I didn't add it up to $1 billion. I'm not sure which lines you're looking at. I'm seeing about 600 million or so. But in terms of how we think about that, yes, there is an increase in the federal funding because of the increase in healthcare inflation. But make no mistake, this year is just the beginning of some of those HR 1 impacts. As you can see in the charts before you, the next year is really when it really starts to take hold. But it does start this year.
Commissioner, thank you for that response. And in fairness to you, my figure, which is $1 billion, 12 million comes from Title 14, Child Residential, Title 19, the Community Care Program, Title 19, ICF-IDD, Title 19, Medical Assistance, and Title I, Children's Health Insurance Program, all which can be found on page C21 of Schedule 2 of the Federal Revenues. I believe the numbers add up correctly to just over $1 billion. But to your point, Commissioner, and I think it's a point well made, we are looking at having to comply with additional requirements, and I believe it is appropriate to sound the alarm that we need to be ready. But as I understand it, Commissioner, there are two avenues by which we must secure our continued federal funding. One is to clean up the state's error rate. Right now, Commissioner, I believe the error rate has been demonstrated to be 4.1%, and we need to get it below 3%. Is that correct?
It is 4.1% now.
And we do need to get it below that 3% to ensure that we're not penalized?
I can't remember the cap if it's 4 or 3, but rest assured we are working to get that error rate down.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. And then the other component that we have to be ready for is what has been described by you as a work requirement. In fact, however, it's a work or a volunteer or a caregiver or a student requirement. Any of those different categories would allow the individual that's receiving family care to continue their coverage. Do I have that correct?
I want to be clear, Assemblyman. I'm not here to debate HR 1. I have my own feelings. I made that clear in my opening statement. My major point, however, is that whether you agree with it or not, whether you agree with this as a worthy policy or not, those paperwork burdens will result in the loss of coverage for 100 to 150 to 300,000 New Jerseyans. You might think that's a fine, worthwhile, just idea. I don't think that's what's important for the purpose of my job sitting in this chair. Yeah, it would be a lot easier if we repeal them, I'll be honest. But even if we don't, and I'm going to assume that we don't, for purpose of my testimony and what we're doing for the department, I assume we don't repeal. But if we just ignore the impacts and ignore the coming $6 billion that's going to cost what we're losing in healthcare and federal dollars for this state, if we don't acknowledge that that is coming our direction, I'm not doing due diligence, and my job to let you all know and work with you all, every one of these members, to figure out a pathway forward. So I don't think the debate here is whether or not HR 1 is or is not a good idea. I have my own feelings, but that doesn't matter at all for the pathway we're carving forward. I'm assuming HR 1 is here to stay.
And Commissioner, I couldn't agree more with many of your statements. I think we have points of commonality, and my purpose in describing the two methods by which we can ensure continued funding is to demonstrate a shared commitment to work together so as not to lose funding, because I fully agree, Commissioner, we don't want to have any funding reductions in the state of New Jersey. We stand united in that regard, and we want people to experience their continued good health by having good health care plans. But I believe an understanding of HR 1 is important to ensure that we're able to work together and educate our populace so that they can help us help them.
Absolutely. And I just want to connect two dots you just referred to. The error rate, what you have before you in this chart on the direct
Yes.
fiscal impacts of New Jersey, that total $5 to $6 billion in the out years, has nothing to do with the error rate. Nothing to do with the error rate. The error rate restrictions come in some out years. I can't remember the date. And yeah, the amount you're above, 3 or 4, I can't remember, the federal government can take additional money back in those future years. But these impacts I'm talking about here, these impacts in this fact sheet, error rate, no error rate, 5, 1, doesn't matter. These changes are coming. So I want to be clear, we cannot escape the cuts that are coming as a result of HR 1, no matter what we do on the error rate. Now, I agree, we should get our error rate down. There are provisions that, in fact, impinge upon our federal financing if our error rate is too high. We've committed to that. We saw that. We're working on that. Happy to defer to Medicaid Director Woods over here if you want further information on what we're doing, because we're doing a lot, let me be clear. And I think we'll get there before those restrictions come into play. But the main point is that has nothing to do with the size of the coverage cuts or the provider talks. Those are in law.
And those cuts, Commissioner, that you're now referring to are those which I just went through, whether it be the employment requirement, the caregiver requirement, the volunteer requirement, the student requirement. If we are able to encourage the residents that currently benefit from family care to either assume a position of employment or a position as a volunteer or enroll in school, we may be able to avoid those cuts as well, or am I mistaken?
We are doing everything we can, as I said, just as you said, right? What I've said is we want to make sure that every eligible individual stays on the program and can renew on the program. That's my first priority. I said that in my opening. I'll say that again to you here. There's no version of any expert out there who believes that there aren't eligible people who are going to lose coverage as a result of those paperwork burdens. Again, not arguing the point about whether that's a good idea or not. Everyone may choose their own, but we are going to lose, no matter how good of a job we do, no matter how perfect a world we could create by January 1, we will lose eligible individuals who qualify all those things that you just talked about, who do all those things. We're going to lose people who qualify for everything you just said, who are going to be without coverage starting not in January, but particularly next state fiscal year.
Commissioner, thank you. To move on to a different topic, there are other cuts within the Human Services budget for this year that impact various areas across the state, inclusive of Meals on Wheels for Ocean County, $100,000, a senior wellness pilot program for $4 million, the ARC of Monmouth County for $295,000. My question, Commissioner, is how did we arrive at determining what cuts to what programs would be made? And, you know, I truly want to be gracious to you. I understand that you only had a couple of months. You came in, you had to prepare this budget. But how did this happen? Who determined this year's winners and losers?
As I understand those particular line items, and I did just arrive 3 months ago, but as I understand, all of those that you just mentioned were what we colloquially referred to as legislative ads, designed to be a one-year supplement for a particular program. Some of these are valuable. Some of them are maybe less evidence-based. But as in the particular budget environment we faced, I would say most of those, I don't know if all, I can't know off the top of my head, those legislative ads were removed in the governor's budget.
Was there any data, Commissioner, that went into an analysis of the various programs that were cut? Or were they simply all what had previously been referred to as legislative add-ons that were indiscriminately cut?
I think in recognition of the fact that these were intended to be one-year supplemental budget funding, they were treated as one-year supplemental budget funding.
Okay. Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
And I wish you well.